people who have left third world countries for first world countries. What surprised you the most about life in first world countries? This might be my personal experience, but I grew up thinking that breaking the rules and getting away with it is what makes people cool. Also, doing the least amount of work necessary to stay afloat while trying to manipulate people into giving more than you're worth. When I moved to an environment where people were actually ready to work for what they wanted, I had a bit of a culture shock. A lot of my family are blown away by supermarkets. Where they're from, you have to wait in lines for hours to get to the grocery store, and there's no guarantee there'll actually be food once you get to the front of the line. On a lighter note, they're also really surprised by how common lawns and yards are and hate them with a passion. According to them, they're useless, take up valuable space, and are far inferior to courtyards. I'm first gen. But this is what my mom told me. You can get any produce you want here. You can eat summer fruit in the winter time. There was a snowstorm going on outside, but the grocery store still had strawberries and grapes. So where my family is from, the produce available is only the produce in current season. You don't get to eat produce that can't grow where you live, or if it isn't in the proper season. We take it for granted. But hey, even in Alsace you can buy kiwis. The fact houses came complete. I come from Brazil. There the houses come all empty when you buy them. No kitchen, laundry, anything. You have to buy everything. I'm not sure if this is changed or not since I moved to America a long time ago. Another thing, safety. I almost died twice in Brazil, and my mother couldn't use her cell phone or calmly walk out of a bank or even drive with her purse out in the next seat. Everything had to be hidden or you could be robbed or even killed. Whenever I go to Brazil to visit, I always get tense and I get panic attacks because of the violence. Also didn't help the fact that I lived in one of the most, if not the most violent state. In Australia, we rent empty houses and you bring everything with you. In fact, anything left behind by previous tenants would likely be considered junk or an inconvenience. I know it's different in places like New York where apartments often come furnished when you rent, and I always thought this was because it would be hard to move furniture in and out of tall buildings, often with no elevator. Same goes for London, I believe. How many things are free? Like cups, plastic utensils, condiments, matches, napkins. You can go to a gas station and ask for matches and they will give them to you ... for free. Community dinners, random donuts brought into the office, pizza, random lunches, people offering you free rides, etc. etc. Food banks. So many things are just given to you if you know how to look. Perfectly good couches left on the street, desks, etc. Go to the free section on Craigslist to see what I mean. The whole pick a penny, leave a penny thing blows my mind till today. Free money ... Can you imagine that? People are literally leaving money for other people just because of the inconvenience of change. It's mind-boggling. Frankly, I'd be deeply concerned if this wasn't the case. Of course, not all people leave change. Leave something for donation, or pay it forward. Choose your giving option here, but a lot of people do. I'm not sure about the US, as I haven't lived there for many years, but where I live, Germany, it's standard to have containers where you can donate your change to charity groups, animal shelters, etc. at stores, pharmacies, and pretty much anywhere that isn't a chain grocery store or something. It's not all stores, but I would say a good 25% do it. There was a period in my life where I would consistently use the vending machine near my workplace. I always don't pick up the few cents of change, thinking I'll leave it for someone. Sure, it started 'cause my wallet had too many coins, but the habit stuck. One day, through my effort to keep minimal coins in my wallet, I found myself short of several cents. Thankfully, a like-minded person left his change and I got my drink. My dad was very surprised the military doesn't force you to join or have random groups to kidnap for their own military groups. Also, my cousins were surprised helicopters can be used for things other than weapons. Edit: America is not perfect, but I'm happy we don't have to endure the harsh reality of war and can escape it. Smile. Ugh. The idea of being surrounded by my family is giving me hives. That's the great thing about the US. If your family is full of abusive shitheads, you can pack up and leave and never have to deal with them again if you don't want to. Of course, it might be nice to have a large extended family if they weren't abusive shitheads. How people can just openly criticize their governments without fear of repercussions. I always thought it was incredible that there were so many late-night hosts who would talk crap about politicians and wouldn't be in any danger with the law. If I tried even a fraction of what they said, I'll be having a very interesting time with the police. Two things for me. One positive and one not so much. One of the things I noticed was how organized everything was. Roads were clean and directions clear. If I wanted to get my driver's license, I'd know where to go. There were processes for everything. Things are just well organized. The not so positive thing I noticed was how weak and non-resilient young people are. There is this thing I call immigrant mentality. Example is, if I lose my job, I know that I'll find something in a few days. Might not be what I want, but I'll find a way to take care of my family. Also, how miserable and lonely some people were. Even when on paper you're better off, they're not fulfilled. That to me was very interesting. Obviously this doesn't apply to everyone and this is just a generalization, but I noticed it. The second one bothers me as well as someone who grew up in a rural farm community in the US. I was taught that you must always find a way to support yourself, even if it's something you don't like, and you are always expected to work hard and faithfully at your job. I talked to my friends who grew up in the city who literally have no job about how they could find temp work in manufacturing or something, and they simply don't want to do it, even though they literally have zero money. I just don't understand that mentality. There's a lot to be said about number 2. I find humans need challenge. In this first world, sometimes there isn't enough guidance and challenge, and our issues are really stupid issues enforced on us by capitalism and all that. Our issues are still real issues though. Financially speaking, it's hard to make it here. Thing is, my parents were immigrants. Their generation couldn't process their trauma. Guess who inherited it? My generation. We may seem less resilient, but in reality, we're working out the trauma so we don't pass it down. Lots of immigrants seem resilient and we are, but a lot of it is fight/flight/trauma. Humans need recovery time. Can't explain why kids who aren't from refugee families are the way they are. How miserable and lonely some people were. Even when on paper you're better off, they're not fulfilled. That to me was very interesting. I can't speak for everyone, but this is definitely a problem I see in hyperdeveloped nations that I don't see when I travel to developed or developing nations. It's overstimulation to the point of just blandness. I come from a hyperdeveloped nation but lived in a small town of less than 10,000 people, and I moved from there to a megacity, and my god, everything was just crazy and I was hustling everywhere, but eventually everything just became mundane. Now when I travel to developing nations, I'm always impressed by how they are all just constantly working and constantly, at least for their relative condition, quite happy. They must look at people in hyperdeveloped nations and think, you bastards have everything you could possibly want and more, why aren't you smiling? Forget about the disposable utensils. People waste food. I knew a lady who threw away a $15 ribeye steak just because it fell on the floor. She also threw away a jar of pickles because it was left open on the table overnight. Some people think that a can of soda has to quench your immediate thirst, and if you can't finish the can in one go, you just throw it away. I knew a guy who threw my can away because he felt that my soda would go flat, so it's better to get a new one. There is also a lot of BS about cooking meat to a desired level of doneness. Whoever overcooks their steak by a few degrees Fahrenheit, getting medium instead of medium rare, and throws a tantrum over it, you have to be punished by being sent to the corner of the kindergarten room that you ran away from. To our defense, there's what infrastructure made specifically to deal with reusable plastic waste, even if it's just turned into insulation or safely burned in high-temp incinerators, not the same as just burning plastic. On the other hand, another extreme, Southeast Asia, where they use as much plastic wrappings and one-time use plastics as us, but they just stuff it into plastic bags and yeet it into a nearest water body, because they don't have any clue what else to do with it. Which brings me to the idea that it's kind of despicable to sell this plastic to such undeveloped people, because they're just going to turn 100% of it into useless pile of garbage at some point, which is kinda fucking up the oceans big time. I'm not from a third world country, but I spent a few years living in one. One thing that struck me when at home was how empty our streets are. Out in the suburbs where I live, you very rarely see people walking about. Over there, people were always walking about no matter where in town you were. Fishing as a recreational activity was considered odd behavior. Multi-generational living was the norm. I live in the Philippines right now, but I had visited the US before, and here is pretty much all I can think of right now. Literally everything is bigger. The streets, houses, milk is in gallons not liters, onions and tomatoes the size of softballs, serving sizes, and pretty much everything. Here in the Philippines fruits are seasonal, while in America I can have watermelon whenever I want. Slow internet speeds in the Philippines and in America are very different. Guns. Not having to worry about the water company turning off our water because of the near-empty dam. The Indian guy from the IRS that kept calling us. Americans and Filipinos have very different ideas of traffic. Places you call the hood or ghetto is something that most Filipinos dream of, because houses in those areas are actually decent. Definitely the immense freedom and all the choices you have. Bored? Just go for a walk in the park, the cinema, museum, the skate park, whatever. No restrictions, no danger, no dirty looks if you're by yourself. Hungry? Go to a cafe and sit there, call a friend and go to the restaurant, or even just pull out your phone and order delivery. Insane. Something else is the individual freedom and people minding their own business. How everyone rocks their individual style regardless of what other people might think. Where I come from, everyone dresses the same, talks and acts the same, etc. Everyone is constantly wary of each other and expecting the worst. So going to Europe and seeing people with crazy colored hair, trendy revealing clothes, smoking, walking their fancy dogs, riding their bicycles, and young people just hanging out together, just enjoying life and being carefree was really weird to me. Needless to say, I felt really out of place. My mother was most shocked at the sheer number of privileged people who shun grade school education and are proud of it, eventually morphing into anti-vaxxers and flat-earthers. Meanwhile, in her day she often had to choose between eating and paying for the bus ticket to school. In many cases, food won, so she'd blister her feet walking to school in worn-out shoes. Yet in the West, people get K-12 education guaranteed for free, with free school buses and free meals for the lower-income students, and they're total ingrates about it. I'd like to clarify that it's usually not impoverished families being ungrateful for free education, meals and transportation. There are many kids whose parents wouldn't be able to feed them breakfast without those meal programs. In the beginning of COVID, I know the Los Angeles area had to close down their schools, and it was a big issue for many low-income families because those kids were now losing a meal each day that they relied on. Luckily, we have the infrastructure to support such wonderful things. It's usually middle-class or wealthy families who act like they are entitled to better despite it literally being free. Your mother sounds like a saint though. Can I ask where she was from? When something is given for free, people tend to assume it has no value. After all, valuable things aren't given for free. The problem is that education isn't free. It's just paid for by the taxpayer. But because taxes are collected automatically through paychecks, and comes from everyone, not just parents, most people don't make the connection that they actually are paying for their kids' education, meaning they don't value it, and equally the children aren't encouraged to value it because their parents don't tell them it's valuable. I worked with a great deal of immigrants when I worked for the state, and one of them talked about this once. She was from West Africa, and said the police were the most shocking thing about the US. They are incorruptible, and enforce everything. She said that was very shocking to see, and was very confused by people's anger at the police. A police officer that you can't bribe was beyond her expectations. You might not know this, but native African immigrants, especially from West Africa, don't like African Americans. This caused some issues in my past employment, and the thing they constantly gave them shit about was how they talked about police and how they acted. This caused some serious screaming matches. I had to break up more than once, and this conversation was an extension of that issue. Running water 24/7, electricity, almost no power cuts. I've been here 7 years, maybe one power cut for 5 minutes. Back home, it was 2-3 hours of power cut on a regular basis. Traffic, so organized and easy to follow. AC/heat, at least where I live. For people who are saying the locals are finding problems to occupy themselves, it's true. I call it privilege drunk. You can never truly appreciate things you have if you are born in it. You have to see the dark side to appreciate the nice things. This leads to locals being entitled because privilege is the normal for them. Moved to the US from India. The good professors at universities care so much and are happy to give you their time if you want to learn. Back home, professors go on a power trip making you wait for them and aren't very helpful. Things just work. Everything is simple. There's a documented process for everything. You can get most things online. You don't need expert knowledge to navigate the system for basics at least. Low-level corruption is zero. People are kind and open-minded and accommodating of differences. People in India are also, but it manifests in a different way that can be a bit annoying to me. Working hours are a lot saner than back home. Guns. They are not for me, but it feels like the British took away our guns after 1857 because they saw what happened in America. When I read history, I respect the way y'all protect your gun rights. National parks, they just blow my mind. Marketing. You guys barely have any history and yet preserve that so well and sell tickets to every random thing that's over 20 years old. Meanwhile, there's so many 1,000-plus-year-old temples in India that aren't maintained well. The individualism is so bad that everyone is so lonely. People cut off their family over things that can be worked out. People also want to exclude family from their lives for silly reasons. People self-exclude themselves from taking part in others' lives because they think they'll be unwelcome. People don't realize how good they have it and support stupid political movements that weaken the core of America. Immigration is a good thing for you guys. Capitalism is a good thing for you guys. The alternative is stagnation and rotting. Don't go down that path. Americans judge their country against Europe. You shouldn't. You're America. You share your history with the other American countries, North and South. You all oppressed your natives, brought in slaves, and now you all have to figure out how to live with it. European countries don't have that baggage. The people they oppressed and enslaved live far, far away and their populations are extremely homogeneous. They obviously do better in some respects. All your societal problems will be solved if you stop thinking of yourselves as Europeans in a different geography. Your food is so unhealthy. The amount of choice in the stores. It's not that my country didn't have most of the same things, but if you wanted a yogurt you had like 1 or 2 choices. Globalization is closing the gap, but it is still where I notice the biggest difference. Look at the shelves in places like the USA. You have to walk down an aisle and you are still looking at different options of the same thing. A lot of it is not even different flavors, just different brands, different packaging, different target audience. Edit a word. So I know Mexico may not fall under third world category, but my roommate moved to the States from an area that didn't get electricity till 2012. According to him, an actual native of Mexico, at least his hometown is super underdeveloped. The thing he always tells me is so surprising about the US is the sheer amount of different food. Even when he lived in Mexico City for a while, there was still a ton of food he just never had access to. It blew his mind when he found out we have Chinese, German, Indian, Greek, Thai, and Italian restaurants all with walking distance of our apartments.